Good evening and welcome to the Police Commissioners Advisory Committee public hearing on the 2021 annual report of the Brookline Police Department. This meeting is being recorded, as are all of our meetings, and broadcast live on BIG. This hearing is also being captioned. The recording and transcript will be available on our website. At the conclusion of the hearing, we will be asking you to complete a short survey to provide us with feedback about tonight's hearing, and we'll give you more information about that later. I'm Linda Roseman, the chair of the Police Commissioners Advisory Committee. The PCAC was appointed last summer as the result of recommendations of the Police Reform and the Police Reimagining Committees to assist and advise the Select Board in their capacity as police commissioners. One of our charges is to hold a public hearing to present the annual report of the department, and that is the purpose of this evening's program. In a moment, I will introduce Acting Chief Richard Allen, who will then introduce members of the department who will present different sections of the annual report. At the end of the presentations, attendees will be invited to ask questions and comment. Speakers will be allowed 2 minutes, and we will do our best to answer questions. You may indicate that you wish to speak by using the hand raise icon, entering your name in the chat, or putting your question in the Q&A feature. Those who signed up to speak ahead of time will be called on first. I ask that you limit your questions to the topics of this evening's hearing and that common courtesy be observed. No personal attacks will be tolerated. Before I turn things over to the chief, I would like to introduce the members of the PCAC. So when I call your name, if you could just say a little something so that your picture lights up and people know who you are. So Kristen Singleton.
Good evening. Thank you for attending.
Kimberly Richardson.
Hi, good evening.
Paul Yee.
Good evening, I'm Paul Yee.
Judy Fabricant.
Good evening, I'm Judy Fabricant. I'm very glad to be with everyone this evening.
Ron Wilkinson.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
Deputy Superintendent Jen Pastor.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Ann Braga.
Good evening, everyone.
Michael Downey.
Good evening, Michael Downey from the Town Council's office.
Thanks. And Sarah Kaplan, who will be handling the Zoom technology. We couldn't do it without you, Sarah. Chief Allen, I'm going to turn things over to you and let you get started.
Thank you, Linda. Richard Allen, Acting Chief of Police. I want to thank you for having us here tonight, and thank you all for the important work that you do for the department and for the town. I have with me here tonight Deputy Superintendent Jennifer Pastor, Deputy Superintendent Paul Cullinane, Lieutenant Charles Thornton, and also helping out is Sergeant Casey Hatchett. We have a quick PowerPoint presentation that we're going to do and show a quick video, and each of the deputies will speak about their specific divisions, and Lieutenant Thornton will speak about his role. So if we could cue up the PowerPoint. So just a quick overview of our of the activity for the department this year. Overall, the department handled 66,233 calls for service, which was up 4%. Of those calls for service, 4,452 were medical calls. The Part A crimes in Brookline last year were down 17% from 2020. Arrests were 109 total, down 47% from 2020. Field interrogations, there were 33, which was down 8% from 2020. Moving violations were 4,358, which were up 28%. And parking tickets were 76,000, which was up 4%. Part A crimes in the town, reported in the town, were down 16.84%. From the 778 Part A crimes in 2020. In addition to the 647 Part A crimes, there were also 60 attempted Part A crimes and 10 crimes reported in 2021, but had occurred in the previous year. Arrests, In 2021, there were a total of 109 arrests, which were down 47% from the 206 made in 2020. In 2021, 49 of the arrestees were identified as white, which is 44%. 31% of the arrestees were identified as Black, which is 28.44%. 23 of the arrestees were identified as Hispanic, which is 21%. One was identified as Asian Pacific Islander. 5 were identified as Middle Eastern, Eastern India, Eastern Indian, which is 4.59%. Of the 109 arrests in 2021, 91 were identified as male, excuse me, which is 83%. 18 were identified as female, which was 16%. Juveniles accounted for just 2 arrests for the department in 2021. Deputy Superintendent Paul Cullinane is going to do a breakdown of the arrests for the department.
Thank you very much, Chief. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with you. As you can see, in 2021, our arrest breakdown were by resident and non-resident. We had 15 residents arrested that were white. We had 9 residents that were arrested that were Black. We had 4 Hispanics arrested that were residents. No Asian people were arrested that were residents, and 2 Middle Eastern people who identified as Middle Eastern. Now that gives us 30 residents that were arrested in Brookline, and 27.5% of that is the total of people that were arrested. Of the non-residents, 34 non-residents identified as white, 22 identified as Black, 19 as Hispanic, 1 is Asian, 3 is Middle Eastern, which recorded to 79 arrests. That brings us to our 109 total arrests. Arrest by offenses in residency. This would be basically of the people that were arrested, 18 residents in Brookline were arrested for domestic violence. 8 non-residents were arrested. Warrants were attached to 7 residents arrests and 37 non-residents arrests. We had 8 traffic arrests. Those were all of non-residents. There were no residents arrested on traffic arrests. We had 8 OUIL or OUID, which is operating under the influence of liquor or drugs. We had 9 B&E arrests or attempted B&E arrests, and those were all non-residents that tried to break into people's homes from Brookline. We had 4 additional felony arrests from residents, and we had 10 non-residents that were arrested for different felonies. That brings us to the 29 and 80 number. And as you can see, domestic violence is a mandated arrest by policy. Warrant arrests are mandated by state law. OUIL and OUID, I'm sure the jurists that are on this committee will agree that those are necessary arrests. And in my opinion, all felonies should be placed under arrests, which leads us to the point that there were 8 traffic arrests that were actually discretionary, possibly discretionary. And of those 8 traffic arrests, I did do a little research, and I found out that a lot of them were operating after suspension, and there was no one else to take possession of the vehicle. The vehicle needed to be towed, so under the policy, the person was arrested. As you can see, these are our crimes. Our crimes started out in 2011 at 960. They are down slightly, but as you can see, the correlation to arrests versus the crimes are down significantly. And that's basically because around 2014, we changed our policy, especially on traffic arrests, where we changed our towing policy, which allowed us to tow a vehicle for a suspended driver's license, and to also release the vehicle to another driver who was in the vehicle, a passenger, so long as they had a license. So as you can see, our arrests have dropped dramatically since 2014, and I believe they'll stay in that course going forward.
Deputy Superintendent Jennifer Pastor will discuss the field interrogations for 2021.
Great, thanks, Chief. Just to sort of piggyback on what Deputy Cullinane had said, we started around that time, 2014, 2015. We began to look at reasons that we were stopping people and arresting people. Around that time, we also took a look at our field interrogation system. And it used to be the case that, you know, obviously police officers, just by nature of what we do, we're in contact with a lot of people every day, right? And sometimes it's saying hi to somebody waiting online for coffee. Sometimes it's giving somebody directions. And then sometimes it's, you know, because we have the legal basis and the authority, you know, to make a stop to investigate a crime or on suspicion of criminal activity. So prior to 2015, anybody that we had a more substantial encounter with was having their name put into the same kind of database. And around that time, we decided to designate a lieutenant to differentiate between what we call a stop that's informational. And that would be, for example, if you have a babysitter who sets off your house alarm, or, you know, somebody that it might have been a witness, you know, might have been a caller on something that didn't quite seem right, wasn't enough for a police report, but we wanted to document the interaction, that would go in as information. So the number that you see here, the 33 field interrogations that were conducted, was actually a slight decrease from the year before. But those were people where the interaction was determined to be of criminal intelligence value. So of those numbers, the 33, I won't, you know, read to you the breakdown there for race. I trust that you can all read. I will point out, however, that I think in 27 of those cases, 27 of those FIs were the result of a call for service that came into us, as opposed to the rest, which were self-initiated police activity where reasonable suspicion was developed due to a wide variety of circumstances. So typical for an FI that's put in as a person of interest, crimes, for example, like shoplifting, where we're called, we respond. You know, it's a crime has been committed, we have somebody identified, but you know, the store owner doesn't want to pursue it any further, and it's worth putting in, you know, to get the information out if we're having a series of shopliftings or things like that. However, it doesn't get documented necessarily in an arrest report. And that's the breakdown by residents, non-residents, and by race.
Deputy Superintendent Cullinane will go over the moving violations and the breakdown of the moving violations for 2021.
Thank you, Chief. In 2021, there was 4,358 moving violations issued, which is an increase of 28% from the 3,400 that were issued in 2020. As you can see from the display, 57% of the operators identified as white, 18% were identified as black, 12% were identified as Hispanic, and so on and so on. Of these moving violations, 58.6 were issued to individuals identified as male, 40% were issued to identify individuals identified as females. Sorry about that. As you can see, this is the graph on moving violations issued by race. Moving violations issued in a 3-year comparison. And as you can see, the numbers are pretty much correlate the same over the last 3 years. There really isn't much difference. And I'm assuming going forward, it'll be the same way.
So that, oh, sorry, it's Deputy Pastor again. I can take over here for traffic crashes. You see here, there's 1,062 reported traffic crashes that happened in Brookline last year. This number doesn't account for the crashes that were kind of handled just, you know, between drivers where they exchanged information and didn't involve our agency at all. These are the ones that either came in through our CAD, or an officer was saying, you know, working a detail or working in the field and observed it and assisted and called it in. So it is, the numbers are up slightly from 2020 for reasons I think we can all understand, but they are slightly down from 2019 and from the years before that. And then, we do, Officer Goon, I know I saw his name on the call. He's our department crime analyst. So one of the things that he's charged with doing is taking a look every week at where crashes are happening. And we deploy our traffic unit to these sort of crash prone locations. If we can identify those and try to increase enforcement, whether that's tickets or warnings or kind of public service campaigns, in an effort to combat crashes. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Here's the parking ticket information. It's a 4% increase from the number of violations that were issued in 2020.
Thank you. Lieutenant Charles Thornton, who runs the Office of Professional Responsibilities, will go over the citizen complaints for 2021.
Good evening. As you see, last year, 2021, there were 4 official complaints, citizen complaints. And these are citizens who had filled out complaint forms either online or through our email system, through our website. I had taken over this job in July, so I had not been involved personally with 3 of these investigations. As you can see there, their findings, 4 different findings: withdrawn, unfounded, mediated, and open. And the open one is continued to be open into this year as well. Use of force, part of my job is to investigate use of force that police use. What I will do is look at traffic or police reports, and if force is used, to take a deeper look and see if they abided by policy. 2021, we had 18 use of force incidents, decrease of 25% from 2020, where there was 24 types of force used. Hands-on, 72% would be 13 of those incidents. With OC spray, we used twice. Displaying and pointing a firearm, we have 1 instance each, although those are pretty similar. They weren't really pointed at anyone. They were displayed. They were, and when 2 firearms were drawn, and we have a less than lethal 40 millimeter weapon, and that had gone off once. That's actually not technically use of force, but it did go off, so we included it in this report.
Thank you. Deputy Cullinane will go over department staffing and department staffing issues.
Well, Chief, one more. We have motor vehicle pursuits. So I continued with use of force. Motor vehicle pursuits, another thing very important for this office to look at and for police to keep tabs on. 2020, we had 2 motor vehicle pursuits, decrease of 1 from 3 in 2020. As you can see here, the first pursuit occurred after a failure to stop for a traffic violation, an evasion from the police that happened on the overnight shift. Second pursuit was multiple agencies involved in the pursuit that came into Brookline and then left Brookline, and that I believe was called off by the Newton police.
Thank you. Deputy Cullinane will go over department staffing and department staffing issues.
Thank you, Chief. Currently, we're budgeted for 135 sworn officers. That's a reduction of 4 officers from last year. Those 4 officer positions were created from the Marijuana Mitigation Fund. We were never able to fill them due to lack of candidates, so they were eventually reduced by the town. The department currently has 116 officers. The department consists of 24%, I believe it's 24% minority officers and 11 or 12% female officers, for a total of 36%. There are 19 vacancies currently. The vacancies are up 9 from last year at this time. 5 patrol officers, 2 detectives, and a deputy have left the department, citing low pay and the perceived lack of support from the town and opportunities to advance. The officers left to go to Everett Police Department, the Massport Police Department, the Boston Police Department, Sharon Police Department, Foxborough Police Department, and also Moultonborough, New Hampshire. We do have 2 more officers investigating leaving to go to Quincy. That person might be on the Quincy Academy in July. State Police, and also 1 officer entertaining a position at the Brookline Fire Department. We did lose an officer actually today in the Cambridge Northeastern Academy. Recruit officer Frankie Ramirez resigned today. He'll be leaving to go join the Boston Police Academy. He receives an officer today. We have 10 active BPD officers sitting for the next civil service exam in hopes of moving to other departments. This is our organizational chart, and anything you can see here in yellow, I won't go over it, but that's where the vacancies are. And you can look at that at your leisure. Department staffing issues, we've had shortages in the patrol division where we have minimum staffing levels. This causes officers to be offered overtime, and when they refuse the voluntary overtime, that leads to forced overtime. So usually, predominantly, the junior officers and the junior sergeants are forced to work the overtime shifts. A lot of officers that are working on the midnight shift, 11:30 to 7:30, are forced to work the day shift. And a lot of the officers that are on the day shift, 7:30 to 3:30, are forced to work the evening shift, 3:30 to 11:30. For the most part, the officers on the evening shift come to work. This has caused a problem for the junior officers, and we have 1 officer, Officer Johnson, who was actually forced to work an extra 3 months last year. We have 2 additional officers, Officer Goodrich, Officer Davis, and they were forced to work an additional 2 months last year. Shift vacancies caused by the mass attrition, 19 in 2 years, comp time usage, vacation time, sick time, training, and other assignments that take officers out of patrol are the primary reasons for the forced overtime, which does cause morale issues and officer safety. We did employ a redeployment policy when Chief Allen took over to try to alleviate some of the forcing situations for the junior officers. At this time, before we force a junior officer, we'll redeploy an officer from one of the other divisions. We do keep track of that. We try to do it as fairly as possible through the other divisions. And that does alleviate some of the forced overtime, which does help the junior officers out quite a bit. The cost to that redeployment are follow-up investigations from detectives, car seat appointments for community service officers, as well as assisting in food pantries and other community events. And of course, the traffic division suffers from the neighborhood complaints from traffic complaints suffer because we don't have officers to handle those calls. And traffic is one of our biggest issues from our residents. There are a lot of issues with vehicles that travel through Brookline from other areas, and basically because of where we're located in our proximity to the city of Boston. This causes some issues with the public because, it's difficult for us to promise to appear for appointments and then have to cancel at the last minute. But it's something that we have to do at this time because we really have to alleviate the forced overtime for our junior officers. Other things we're attempting to do is we're trying to recruit and retain officers, and we're hoping to get better education incentives and increased pay for them. We're also exploring the possibility of a cadet program, and we have updated our recruit video and expanded the outreach to community colleges and other places.
Thank you, Paul. So we'll do, Deputy Pass will do a quick view of the department highlights. We have a quick video that will show also just with some of the department highlights from 2021. So we had that video made up for some of the budget presentations that we've done. I just thought it was important to show it tonight to highlight. It was a very difficult year for our department with the staff shortages and COVID. But I just want to say that the officers really did step up and help out when help is needed. So I just thought that that was a good idea to show that tonight. And Deputy Pastor will go over some of the highlights before we wrap up.
Great, thanks, Chief. And I do want to give another special thanks to Sergeant Hatchett, who pulled a lot of those photos together to make that video. A lot of them you may have seen before. We've been really trying to place an emphasis on utilizing social media to get the word out, to highlight some of the good work that we know our officers are doing day in and day out, not only by ourselves, of course, but with our community partners, trying to sustain, old relationships and build new relationships is really something that we've been able to we've been forced to kind of place a greater emphasis on, when we were asked to take a step out of the schools and out of housing. So it's given us an opportunity to kind of think about different non-traditional law enforcement settings and ways that we can engage with our community. And a lot of what you saw in that video reflects some of the ways that we've been thinking about that. So we still continue to do some of our tried and true programs. Our RAD self-defense class, I wouldn't mess with any of those beep teachers if you were watching. They're pretty tough. Our car seat program is spearheaded by our officer Kerrigan in our community service division. The CERT team is alive and well, and we continue to add new members to that. Again, thanks to Sergeant Hatchett and Officer Goon. Our House of Worship programs and active threat trainings, spearheaded by Deputy Cullinane, Sergeant Hatchett again, really helping to empower our community members to make themselves safe and, to get the message out there. If they see something, say something, and we're here always as a partner. Some of the other programs that you saw, the movie nights, the basketball nights, the bike rodeos, things like that. It's not so much about teaching the members of the community a skill, that is part of it, but it's really about building bridges and making connections, because we're obviously, it makes perfect sense. We're able to better serve our community when we really know them. We know what makes them tick. We know what they like and don't like. It helps us to do our jobs better. And really, when those relationships are in place, it makes operations in a crisis so much easier. We don't want to be meeting people in crisis. We want to know what people's baselines are, especially our vulnerable populations, so that when we are called to assist, we kind of know where we're starting from. Oh, sorry, new watch. So we continue to work on the recommendations from those two select board committees. And obviously, we're very grateful for those who have stepped up to serve on the PCAC. It's not, an easy task, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of commitment, but we are really appreciative of all of you as individuals and as a group. When we asked our officers to come out of the schools, we tried to think of ways that we could get our messages and some of the lessons into the hands of our young people. And we were fortunate enough to have been awarded the Lauren Astley Dunn Memorial grant, so that we will be offering a version of the AWARE program to middle school students in Brookline. That's actually starting here at the station on Wednesdays after school. So we're pretty excited about that initiative. That lists there a few of the other grants. We have a grant currently from the Department of Mental Health that fully funds our crisis intervention team, including our LICSW, Annabelle Lane, and our staff assistant there. Those two positions are 100% grant funded if you notice them on the org chart. You'll see us more out on bicycles. We've increased the number of traffic assignments and traffic posts, again, keeping in mind that traffic is one of our biggest issues in town. Increased the number of park and walks, which is really just not a program that's housed in community service, but rather it's getting the patrol officers, the ones that are responding to your 911 calls, with that same kind of mentality that we want them out. We want them engaging with members of the community in good times, so that they're not strangers when we meet them in times of crisis. We're also currently working towards our third reaccreditation with MPAC, and that process should be completed hopefully by mid-May. I don't know if if Ron, if you want to speak on this, but I know Linda had referenced it in the beginning. This is a feedback survey specific to the meeting tonight. So I know we'll have another chance to see the QR code and the Survey Monkey link.
We in the PCAC think it will be very, very important for us to increase our engagement with the community. And we're hoping that people who are attending this public hearing, perhaps those who will not have a chance to speak or those who prefer to think and then respond later, will have an opportunity to do so with this Survey Monkey post hearing feedback form, which you can access either by typing in the address that you see in your screen, or you can just point your smartphone at the QR code and do that. We'll also have this address and QR code posted on the PCAC page on the town website, and it will also be posted on the police department page on the town website. Unfortunately, right now, the survey is only available in English. I would love to have the survey available in additional languages going forward, but that will take some resources, but it's something that we aspire to. But for now, we're hoping that the survey will be very helpful in providing just your general feelings about this whole thing. So we look forward to getting your responses. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ron, and thanks to all who just presented. So speaking of surveys, Ron also devised another survey when he served on the Reimagining Committee, a civilian feedback survey for people who have interactions with the police, in their daily lives. And Sarah Kaplan's actually going to present some data in regard to those. The ODICR has been kind enough to sort of take that over and collect that data and share it with us from time to time. That's also posted on their website, and I believe it's on our website as well. So Sarah, take it away. Oh, so I guess Ron was on the Reform Committee. I always get those mixed up, sorry.
So since the civilian feedback form was published and circulated in April of 2012, it has received 25 non-test responses. 11 of those responses came within the first month. 4 responses came within May and June of 2021. 3 responses between the months of June and September. 4 responses between September and November. 1 response between November and January, and 1 response through February 2022. There were no responses in the month of March. Overall, 52% of respondents indicate a very positive interaction with officers. And then we have written descriptions of each of those interactions. I'm not going to read those, but this form is available. And if you cannot find it, please let me know and I will send it to you directly. The demographics of the people who are using this form are as follows. 5 respondents are between the ages of 25 and 34. 4 respondents between the ages of 35 and 44. 3 respondents between the ages of 45 and 54. 5 respondents between the ages of 55 and 64. 2 respondents who are 65 or older. 4 respondents that prefer not to answer the question, and 2 that skip the question. Gender breakdown is as follows. 10 respondents identify as female. 10 respondents identify as male. 2 prefer not to answer. 2 skipped, and 1 identified as non-binary. The sexual orientation of the respondents are as follows. Heterosexual 14, homosexual or gay 2. 1 person who said straight, how is this relevant to the misconduct of your officers? 6 who preferred not to answer, and 2 who skipped. Ethnicity breakdown is as follows. 2 who identified as Black or African American, 3 who identified as Hispanic or Latino, 4 who preferred not to answer, 2 who skipped, and 5 who are white or Caucasian, for a grand total of 25. their relationship in Brookline. They're a business visitor in Brookline, we're 2 people. They live and work in Brookline, we're 2 people. They live in Brookline, we're 13 people. 2 that skipped the question. And 3 that worked in Brookline, 1 preferred not to answer, and 2 were none of the above. And then we did a little bit of a comparison between comparison of ethnicity and rate of interaction. So under neutral, we have 1 resident who identified as Hispanic Latino, 2 preferred not to answer, and 2 who were white or Caucasian. Somewhat negative, all three were white or Caucasian. For very negative, we have 1 person who identified as Black or African American, 2 who identified as Hispanic Latino, and 1 who skipped, I believe. And then for a very positive, we have 1 Black or African American, 2 preferred not to answer, 1 who skipped, or 9, and 9 who are white or Caucasian. And then the grand total equals up to 25.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And thanks to Ron for devising that survey. So we're going to now move on to the public comment questions part of the evening. And as I mentioned earlier, you can either raise your hand, write a question in the Q&A, or put your name in the chat indicating that you wish to speak. And you will have 2 minutes to speak. And if we can, we'll answer your questions. It's not the sort of thing where you ask a question and nobody responds. This is an interactive thing. So we'll do our best to answer questions. And if there's anything we can't answer tonight, we'll do our best to get back to you with the answer. So Sarah, is there anybody indicating they wish to speak?
We have, so far I've received 3 comments in Q&A, and a 4th just came in.
Okay.
First question from Susan Park. I will put my question in the comment here in case I missed the public hearing portion.
Okay.
What were the other felony offenses under arrest by officers in residency? And the comment is that moving forward, the report should include cannabis public consumption complaint calls, since smoking cannabis in public places is illegal. Were there public cannabis consumption complaint calls this year?
Okay. I think maybe Paul can maybe answer that?
Yes, thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. Both good questions. I have not done a deep dive into the other felonies. I can do so and get that back to you as soon as possible. As far as the cannabis goes, that is a great idea, and maybe next year we'll do that.
There is a note here from Casey Hatchett. Hi, Susan. In 2021, there were 52 public consumption complaints and 1 marijuana retailer complaint.
Thanks, Casey.
Marty Rosenthal, is next on the list. I'm going to find him and then promote him to panelist so he can talk.
Great.
All right, Marty, you've been allowed to speak. Please unmute yourself, turn on your video if you like, and you have 2 minutes.
Having trouble finding my video. I see the mute button. I don't mind being videoed, but I'm not finding it.
Okay.
It's usually right next to the mute button.
Yeah, we hear you, but we can't see you.
Well, maybe I should not waste your time with me fiddling as a technophobe and just speak.
Go ahead.
I'll just speak. So I want to address one thing that Superintendent Cullinane talked about, and I want to address it as basically a crisis. All this wonderful presentation really strikes me as rearranging, not even rearranging, it's presenting deck chairs in the Titanic, but the Titanic is something I've talked about before at this committee, which is the current morale issues. And when Superintendent Cullinane talks about 19 vacancies, that pushes my button, and I'm going to push your buttons. These morale issues, we keep talking about it. We talked about it on the Reform Committee. We've heard about it for the last year. And all we get is talk, and all we get is morale getting worse because of things that this town is doing. There were, before the committees, both of them, there was the attempted budget cut, 17%. There was an attempt to kill the police contract. Both of them failed, but they created ill will in the community and ill will towards the police department. And the officers here know what I'm talking about. And I think that most of you know what I'm talking about. And that was
1 minute.
demoralizing. I'm sorry?
1 minute.
Oh, I didn't even realize. Did you say a time limit?
2 minutes was the time limit. You have a minute, Marty.
I wasn't aware of a time limit and I didn't write anything out. So what I want to talk about is basically an imminent crisis, which is the hiring of a police chief. And your committee was excluded from that. And I think that's terrible.
So Marty, I'm going to ask you not to, we're not going to talk about that tonight. This isn't really the right forum for that. We're talking about the annual report.
Well,
And,
well, you know, most respectfully, I have my 2 minutes and I'd like to use them as I wish.
okay.
So thank you. And I apologize if I'm off agenda, but there's something coming up right now, which is that
30 seconds.
I know, well, I've been interrupted twice. There was a process to hire a police chief that was lacking transparency. You folks were excluded. It violates your charter, which I helped write. And you folks should be saying something about it. There's a nominee for the select board. It's their decision. Nobody in the community knows what's going on and why the inside candidates, who are excellent people, two of them are present here, and I don't mean to flatter them, why they were not accepted. There had to be a good reason to do that.
Marty, you run out of time. Please wrap up.
All right, the wrap up is that I think you people, even if you don't have it on your agenda, could individually come to select board tomorrow night at public comment and talk about this process, which is a disgrace. It's a disgrace to what I wrote in 1987 for the police department. It's a disgrace for community policing. And it's a disgrace for the civilian role.
Marty, please wrap up.
I'm done.
Thanks,
That
Marty.
was it.
Thank you. Thank you. Who's next, please?
Hold on.
Sure.
Regina Fowley and then C. Scott
Ananian.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Regina, you've been permitted to talk. Please unmute yourself and feel free to turn on your video. If you're comfortable, your 2 minutes will begin.
I did not ask to speak. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Your hand's up. That's why she called on you. So I see there's a question from Amy Takanami in the chat asking about the redeployment of walk and talk and SROs, which I think Jen did talk about. The question is, can you say more about redeployment of SROs and walk and talk officers?
Sure. I think so. So the officers that were formerly assigned as SROs, there were 4 of them. In walk and talk, there were 3 of them. They were housed within the community service division while they had those titles. When the board moved to remove them from those roles, they remained in the community service division, and we shifted their responsibilities, particularly with the SROs. They're no longer proactively engaging with kids in schools. They're no longer teaching classes in the schools. However, they maintain their NASRO certification. They have a specialized skill set. We felt it was the right decision to keep them in community service and instead have them respond as needed. We do continue to have, the schools continue to have kids in crisis. Parents continue to have kids in crisis. There are issues involving juvenile delinquency, mental health issues, kids who are victims of bullying. Removing the officers from the schools did not remove the problems that kids have, right? So we kept those officers in community service. They have a special level of training and a history of working and an interest in working with kids and helping kids and families thrive in our community. In a similar vein, We no longer have officers that are proactively patrolling BHA properties. However, the professional relationships they maintained. You know, the relationships are built so that if residents are still able to call us, we didn't remove any residents' rights to call 911 just because they live in BHA. A lot specifically asked for those officers by name, and when possible, we have those officers respond to calls on BHA property. Sorry. In addition, the officers have additional responsibilities now. Tim continues to be our graffiti expert. Kristen appointed, asked to be recognized as our department's LGBTQIA liaison. And Officer Pilgrim he oversees a lot of things, but including recruitment and getting our students who are in the academy, physically fit and ready to perform as needed. He also does a lot with our social media and is responsible for our department website. So, when we removed some of the responsibilities they were tasked with, we just added others, but wanted to make sure that they maintain their specialties and the things that they were so very good at it and love doing.
So Amy, does that answer your question? I know was there something further you wish to ask about that?
No, I think we should move on. There are three people and attendees with their hands up. We also have more questions in the Q&A. How would you like to do this?
Well, let's look at the Q&A. So Peter Steinberg is asking, are the staffing issues unique to Brookline, or is this a wider hiring issue regionally? And Ann Braga, did you say you wanted to answer that question? Go ahead.
So thank you for the question. In communities throughout the Commonwealth and throughout the country, we've seen a great shift in people changing jobs or leaving the workforce. Additionally, across the town of Brookline, we are finding significant challenges to fill all positions, advertising multiple times. As for police officers, there is a significant decline overall across the Commonwealth in numbers of individuals signing up to take the civil service exam, which is that first step to becoming a police officer. And so we have to choose from those that have selected Brookline as a community or residents of Brookline. And there are a lot of things that tie into that. Currently, I think the police department themselves can talk about specific issues. I think they have outlined them in some of their presentation, but the police department in Brookline, police in general, have a sort of a higher task right now, just given the overall social environment. But also it is, we saw 30% of the workforce quit their jobs without just retiring or doing something else since May of 2021. And so I think, we're seeing some of that impact as well, in people making different choices for themselves.
If I could just say, I think in committee, one of the things that makes it a little unique compared to other departments in the town is that we're not losing officers. They're not leaving the profession and they're not quitting. They're going to other departments. So that is what is causing us a lot of difficulty. We've had an announcement to take lateral transfers in our department, officers coming to our department from other departments. We've had it out for maybe 4 or 5 years now, and we haven't had any inquiries at all. So I think that's what makes our situation unique compared to other agencies in the town, and it's something we continue to work on.
So I see that Ryan Black has a question. If you want to, Sarah, maybe find him and promote him.
Yes. All right, Ryan, you've been allowed to talk. Please unmute yourself and you can turn on your video if you feel comfortable in your 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep, it's a public comment, so I'll get right to it. Hi, Ryan Black, town meeting member from Precinct 6. To be frank, there's something quite disconcerting going on. At a meeting of the advisory committee last week, there was quite a bit of time and energy spent casting dispersions on the prospective hire for police chief because this person is not an internal hire. I didn't grow up in Brookline, so what was striking was that amongst many of the police officers and AC members at the meeting, it was strangely unquestionably true that in their minds, being of Brookline put any candidate leagues ahead of anyone else. Holding such an idea as a heuristic is not grounded in reality, in large part because of the numerous instances of discrimination both inside and outside the department, not to mention retaliation against those who report such prejudice. The cases of Officer Zariah Musgun and Pilot, as well as more recently Officer Hall, come to mind. Not to mention the hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on payouts for racial discrimination lawsuits. Additionally, multiple people outside the department who have been critical of the police in public forums have been targeted by online right-wing personalities.
Ryan, you have 1 minute.
Turtle Boy comes to mind, whose followers then harass and threaten the department's critics. It really does feel as if there's a lot of active political inertia in town to not challenge the existing culture in the police department. So for instance, that manifests in a push to hire someone internally. So instead of taking steps to mitigate the discrimination and retaliation, it seems as if many officers and conservative town meeting members and conservatives in town generally are inclined to close rank. Relatedly, many officers and town level elected officials choose to blame poor morale in the department and employees exiting on critiques like this one being leveled, as opposed to the actual problems being highlighted. It's easy to blame unfair criticism and, quote, ill will, instead of address the actual obstacles like top officers' refusal to reckon with some evident systemic issues. Lastly, there are many proposals on the table, thanks to the Reimagining Task Force, to have people better suited for many of the police's responsibilities take over various tasks. I mean, I'm sure
Ryan, you reached 2 minutes. Please wrap up.
I'll wrap up the sentence. I'm sure many of you agree there's just many tasks that would be better off having different professionals than the police do. Yet the department has fought these proposals and the proponents of them at every turn. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Ann Weaver has a question regarding Emi Takanami's question. Does redeployment mean, redeployment means relocation, not recreating the SRO and W&T programs, correct? I'm not sure what you're looking for there, Ann. These programs don't exist anymore in their former iteration, if that's your question. I'm not sure if it is. I think, Judy, did you have a question you wanted to ask? Was that you?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. Anne has raised her hand. Anne wants to speak. Yes, of course you may speak. Can you find Ann Weaver and promote her, Sarah? Oh, and I think after Anne,
Anne, you've been permitted to talk.
go ahead, Anne.
Hi. The word redeployment of SRO and walk and talk officers was unclear to many of us. Redeployment to me made me wonder if the Brookline Police Department was actually restarting those programs, or if it meant relocating the officers to other jobs within the police department. My dog is whining in the background, sorry.
Sounds like a human. Do you want to address that, Jen, or not? I mean, do you understand the question?
I'm not sure that I do understand the question. It might be just a matter of kind of workplace jargon with
Yes.
getting,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I think it's a semantics question you're asking, and in the agenda we use the word redeployment, and I think that may have been confusing. It made it sound like it was just being moved to another location, when in fact it's being reimagined. Is that right, Jen? Is that reasonable?
I think so. I think redeploy is a word that we use kind of casually here in the police department, and it might be, we'll redeploy an officer if they're assigned to cross traffic at St. Paul Street and somebody's already there. We redeploy them to Harvard Street. It's I guess it's a location change in that sense of the word. So I understand the confusion. So in this case, it's some of their job responsibilities are in, in terms of serving youth and in terms of serving other vulnerable populations remain the same, but they're not on property.
Does that answer your question, Anne? I don't know if you're still unmuted.
And she still has permission to talk.
Okay, and does that
I
help?
have, oh, I'm still, whoops, I didn't know I was still unmuted. Sure, redeployment to the public has different connotations. So thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
We have C. Scott Ananian
Oh, I
and
forgot.
Carol Thrall, who had their hands up for quite a while.
Okay, let's call on them, and then after them, I think Pam Lodish is next in line. So go ahead, Scott, you're up. And you can put your camera on if you want.
Scott, you have 2 minutes. You've been permitted to talk.
Scott, are you there?
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. You can put your
Yeah,
camera
sorry
on.
about that. Yeah, I think you've got to turn on my camera. I can't do it from here, but regardless, I'll give my piece here or ask my question. So we're hearing that police officers are being paid below their peers and that it's hard to retain officers. And as a member of the advisory committee, this is something I'm hearing not only from this department, but from almost every town department, from legal services to IT to the DPW. I have every reason to believe that it's true. And yet for the past 2 years, the police department has had to return funding from its personnel budget to free cash at the end of the year because it was impossible to spend all the money allocated, which is primarily due to vacancies, of course, which are budgeted in full, but then used to backfill overtime when those vacancies can't be filled. Yet even after paying overtime, money is left over at the end of the year, money which the town voted to allocate to salaries, but which couldn't be paid to officers. We currently, as I understand it, have 19 vacancies. It might be 20 now, if I heard correctly tonight. And I believe the chief says we see the way to fill only 4 of those. And by my rough back of the envelope calculation, it seems like we could give every officer in the department a roughly 10% pay raise if we were budgeting based on the officers we have, not reserving the funds for the 15 vacancies we see no way to fill. So my question is this, and forgive me if it's a bit speculative. How would you redeploy your force if you had fewer but better paid officers? If we were actually, if we could afford to, if we took the number of officers we presently have, but gave them all 10% pay raises? Thanks.
Well, that's kind of a difficult question. We'd have to change the staffing levels in the department. It is speculative. Again, although we have the staff shortages, it's causing a considerable amount of forcing, and that is what we're dealing with. And it's not only at the patrol officers level, we're short at the command staff level also, which eliminates oversight in a lot of these departments that are it's critical in any police department. You need to have proper supervision and oversight. And right now there's 2 departments that aren't that don't have deputy superintendents. So I think it's something that would really need to look at. It's kind of a difficult question to answer right now.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, who's next, Sarah?
Carol Thrall.
Carolyn Thal.
Carolyn Thal, I'm sorry.
Carolyn, that's okay. And you can turn your camera on if you want. I think you can do that.
Yeah, I've set it up. They should be able to do that.
That's okay. I'll spare you guys.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Thal. I'm a town meeting member in precinct 16. A previous commenter was talking about conservatives, which I guess is a political category. I don't think I'm a conservative, but I'm a citizen. And I just want to thank the police department for your work, for this forum. Again, I'm a town meeting member. I'm a parent. I have 2 teenagers. I have friends and neighbors who are police officers, specifically the wonderful Officer Bridges, who I know came to policing as a second career because he wanted to help people. So thank you for the work you do, and I support you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Okay, I see there's a question in the Q&A referring to a question that Ryan Black had, but I don't see his question. So can somebody elucidate that? Ann Weaver says, I would like someone to respond to Ryan's statement, but I don't know what statement she's talking about.
When he spoke out loud.
Oh,
I-
okay, got it.
Earlier in the evening.
Well, all right, I'm not sure who would respond to that. Pam Lodish is saying she's having technical difficulties. Pam, are you able to, if you're not able to figure out oh, there you are.
So Pam, I've allowed you to talk. If you can find, the mute button, you can unmute yourself and speak.
I
There you
did.
go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm just really, well, I'd like to respond to a previous speaker for a second to say that when the advisory committee met, we are a group of very diversified people. And to a person, I would say that we were really troubled by the lack of by the vacancies in our department, by the lateral transfers, which really are very different than the pay situation. And so I think we have a real problem. And I think my colleagues on the advisory felt the same way the other night when we did the hearing. But my question is, what can we as citizens do? Is there any possibility of changing the direction of the select board? Would like to hear how we can possibly be successful by bringing in an outside person when we have as much problem with low morale already and people transferring out of our department. So I would say there was a great deal of support for the police department in the advisory committee hearing, and it wasn't because we don't want change. So I'd like to hear what we can do, what, if anything, we can do on tomorrow night.
I don't know the answer to that question. I guess show up for public comment and let your views be known to the select board. That's my advice. Does anybody else have anything they want to say about that?
It's a real problem, and it makes me very sad, actually.
I actually would like to have more information about the candidate. One of the things, I'm Ron Wilkinson, I'm on the PCAC. I actually also find it troubling that we didn't have more input or information in advance about who the candidate would be. That being said, I'm not willing to judge the candidate because I don't have the information. He may turn out to be a great candidate. I just don't have the information. And I would like to think that the select board does have the information since they're going to vote on him tomorrow. But as soon as possible, assuming that he's appointed, I think that as a member of the PCA, I want to get to know this person very quickly and find out what his agenda is. I'd like to even find out what he was told about the position and the task he would have to do in coming to Brookline. I don't feel like we have that information, and I think it's going to be crucial to how this all plays out.
Okay, so this is going to be a very unpopular thing for me to say, but we really can't be discussing that in this forum. It's a personnel issue. If people want to go to the select board and make their views known, then they should do that. But this is not the forum or the place to discuss this. And I know some people would disagree with me, but that's my ruling. So
Janice Hahn has her hand up.
Janice, go ahead.
All right, Janice, you've been permitted to talk. Feel free to unmute yourself and your 2 minutes will begin.
Hey, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for holding this this hearing. I'd like to just address a little bit about what the advisory committee discussed and its relevance to this the area of morale. So most of the issues that we would like to address at advisory as the finance committee are actually handled contractually. So for instance, the uniform budget item has not been increased in 35 years. That's a problem. There are disparities in the educational incentive program, which is also another thing. But those are not things that we as an advisory committee can deal with. I'd like to address one other issue, which is the $200,000 that remains. That Scott and Annie brought up. So this department is different from other departments in that It's a 24/7 department. It has 3 8-hour shifts. That's very unlike every other department in the town. And so it requires different staffing. What's really unusual is that we use the vacancies, usually not at this high level, clearly, but typically there are some vacancies and those cover overtime costs. And as a result, in all the time I've been on the advisory, and it's been a while, the Brookline Police Department never comes for reserve fund transfers, except for a couple of years ago when they needed a vehicle related to COVID
30
safety.
seconds.
Yes. So I'd just like to say that everything isn't there are no really simple answers here, that the financing of the department is a complex issue. And I want to thank the police department for not coming for reserve fund transfers all the time, for doing a really good job of serving this town with the budget that you have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. Anybody else waiting to speak?
Judith,
Go ahead, Judy.
Well, if there are other members of the public who still want to speak who haven't, I'll happily wait until they're finished.
Is there anyone else, Sarah?
I don't see anyone in attendees. I'm checking the Q&A. I believe we've answered all the questions we can. There's a rather large or long statement from Marty Rosenthal regarding the charge of PCA.
Okay, well,
Before we get going, maybe I can clarify Scott and Judith's question about the return of money.
Janice, yeah.
I think if you factor in the fact that we don't have two superintendents, deputy superintendents, or a superintendent, you'll find that actually we're over our spending because we saved those salaries, which are quite large and larger than the $200,000 that we returned. So if we had those staffing filled, we might be over. We might be asking for a reserve fund transfer. Thank you.
Judith, I believe you're the only one with your hand up. Feel free to speak.
All right, thank you. I want to first of all say thank you very much to the police department for this excellent report, which is very informative to me at least. I have two questions arising from the report. One is the report says that in 2021, the police adopted a policy of minimizing arrests by using summonses instead of arrests whenever that seemed consistent with law and mandates and public safety. And my question is, can that policy continue and perhaps become standard permanent policy? And my other question is on quite a different topic, so perhaps someone wants to comment on that question.
Yes, Judith, it will continue as long as I'm here. It will continue. We emphasize to the officers during our in-service training and on a daily basis the importance of the summons process and to avoid arrests. You know, our department has done a lot with the juvenile issues and juvenile diversion. So yeah, as long as I'm here, it will continue, and I can make those decisions. It will, but.
Okay, thank you. That may be, you know, there are a lot of things that we've learned from the pandemic, much as we never would have chosen. But some things we've learned from the pandemic that we might as well take advantage of those lessons. My other question has to do with staffing levels, and we heard about mandatory overtime because of vacancies and the need to maintain staffing levels. And my question is, what's the source of the staffing levels? That is there some standard set by an accrediting body or by the state, or does the staffing level come from the town?
There is a required staffing level. There's a formula. Paul or Jen, are you familiar with the? Is it an accreditation requirement for the staffing levels? Jen, would you know?
So MPAC won't dictate the number of officers we need to have on shift. What they do is require that whatever you set out in your policy, you adhere to. There is a staffing level in our policies and procedures that dictates the number of officers assigned per shift. And I would have to look to see if that was derived originally from a contract, which I believe was the case, but I can certainly look into that and get you the source.
So if I can ask a follow-up question, I understand that if it's in a contract, then it's in a contract, and until the contract changes, you have to follow it. If it's not mandated by contract, then my question would be, as we've seen in the report over the years, crime has gone down, arrests have gone down, encounters have gone down. So that leads me to ask, is it time to reconsider staffing levels to the extent it might be permissible within contract?
So some of it is collective bargaining, but we did have an efficiency study done not too long ago, and they did not recommend any changes to the staffing level.
I would have to
So
look.
a lot of it is based on call volume, the number of calls we receive. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it.
That committee, the outside committee that came in to conduct that study, I would have to look and see what year it was. It wasn't so long ago, but it was exactly what the chief spoke to, based on, what the community decides is an acceptable response time, given the emergencies, and we try to keep ours between, I think our average time is under 4 minutes for a response for a level 1 emergency. Volume of calls, like the chief said, things like that. Who did the study? Again, I'd have to look at the year, and it wasn't an extension of this department. It was somebody that the town had hired. They might have done other town departments as well, in addition to the police.
Some of it is based on providing the best service to the community. As I said, with our 66,233 calls, 4,452 were medicals. And again, our response time, I would put our response time up against any other department in the state. We have a large elderly population here, and we go to a lot of medical calls, and we're always the first ones there. So I think that's a factor also.
Thank you.
I'd like to add on, I believe that another factor would be that a majority of our calls, Your Honor, are on the north side of town. And we have 4 sectors on the north side of town. We did drop a sector car several years ago. I mean, several, when I was a patrolman. And we combined those 2 sectors together in South Brookline. So that leaves us with 2 cars in South Brookline. Like the chief says, if there was a medical emergency and we had dropped a car in South Brookline, there'd only be 1 officer responding to the call, and the next officer would be responding from North Brookline. And I don't think the people of South Brookline would be best served in that area.
So I see that Bernard would like to speak. Bernard, are you still here? Sarah, can you find him and promote him?
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. I did not have a statement or a question. I just wanted to bring draw people's attention to something I put in the chat box. I think other people have mentioned also that the select board will be taking up the town administrator's recommendation for Ashley Gonzalez as our new chief on the 5th of April, not tomorrow. And we have been told that we will have an opportunity as a select board to meet with Mr. Gonzalez before April 5th. And I believe that there'll be opportunities for the public to have some interaction with them, although I don't know any details of that.
Thanks, Bernard. Anyone else who wishes to make a comment or ask a question?
Specifically, Bernard, will the PCAC have a chance to talk with the candidate?
Good question. If we are given that opportunity, I will let us know.
I do not know, but I think that that's a valid question for the PCAC to raise. They should have an opportunity, along with other members of the community, to have some interaction with Mr. Gonzalez. And can I add one other thing, Linda?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
I hope that the community takes a positive approach to Mr. Gonzalez. I've noticed some stuff on social media, which I try to avoid, questioning his qualifications, the school he went to, which is a type of attitude that I think is inconsistent with our professed belief in inclusion. Not everyone in the world went to fancy schmancy schools like Harvard and BU and MIT. He went to a Southern school, and that is an inappropriate way for people to criticize him or anyone else for that matter. So I just hope the community approaches him in a responsible, respectful way.
Thanks, Bernard. Anyone else? If no one else wishes to.
Kristen's hand is up, and I believe Kimberly, your
sorry.
hand was up.
Where are you? Oh, there you are. Go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, so my question is on a different topic. And so I want to make sure that if we're going to change gears, this is the right time to do it.
Go right ahead.
Okay. I guess I want to start with a comment that Marty Rosenthal put in the chat, which was about the charge of the PCAC and its focus on equity and inclusivity. And I think that the question that I have is that organizations that are interested in building trust and demonstrating their seriousness about equity tend to have metrics, tend to have scorecard, tend to have a way of showing what they're trying to work toward as it relates to the work that they're doing to again, build that trust. And when I read the report, I don't come away with an understanding of how you want us as residents of Brookline and people who come and visit Brookline to measure how well you're doing from an equity perspective in the building of trust. I see lots about how productive you can be. We see lots about the outputs, but I'm not sure that I understand what it is that you want to be held accountable for as it relates to trust and equity. And in the absence of that, it suggests then you have it all together, an organization has it all together and doesn't need to be measured on that. And I don't think that that's what you're intending to communicate either. So it's just an observation. I know I've got some opportunity to be able to talk to folks on the community data sharing, which may be the best venue for it. But it's just very striking to me that I can't tell what you're asking us to measure you on.
Anybody want to respond to that?
I'll respond to it. I think again, it's kind of an open-ended question. Just would like to be judged on the work that we do every day, and that's why we're here and giving all this information. I'm not really sure how else to answer it.
Yeah, so maybe I can just add a little bit more clarity on that. So I appreciate the additional information that was added about use of force, for example. I think it's particularly helpful. It's a little troubling when I see that non-compliance is among the things that we're still using language to describe the use of force analysis, because the only alternative there is be compliant. We don't really have a clear understanding of what it is that needs to be done differently if it's either compliance or not compliance. That doesn't suggest to me seriousness about equity. It doesn't suggest to me seriousness about trying to create public trust. there's this section there where we're talking about field interrogations versus field contacts. You gave us a breakdown of field interrogations, which I really appreciate. I don't know what field contacts are because there's no breakdown of field contacts. And so it's really hard to have an understanding then of how is it that you want the public to see you getting better, especially of issues related to race and equity, because we can't separate them from current policing discussions. They're just there. And so if it isn't possible for us to read your report and have an understanding of where you feel you're experiencing challenges and where you're getting better, then it's hard to connect that to trust.
I understand. We have been trying to break down all of this criteria that we've set forth, similar to the citations that we spoke about our last meeting. We spent a lot of time breaking them down. Deputy Superintendent Cullinane really put a lot of time in trying to break that down, trying to determine what the best criteria was, or what better criteria for you as a board would be. So we are working on it.
I appreciate that, and I'm hoping we'll have an opportunity to continue that discussion.
Just to add, I would also talk about hands-on. Well, you know, we've responded to a lot of domestic violence calls last year, and they're violent. So sometimes you do have to use hands-on, Kristen, and it's not because we want to, it's because we need to.
Yeah, and so in that particular instance, my intent is not to question, it's to understand. And so in those particular instances, when we read what's in the report, the nuance is clearly not there in the report. And so we would have to take the time to understand more. Not everybody is going to be able to have the time to go in depth. And so better ways for us to communicate what your intentions are and where and how you're trying to be better, I think is going to be among those things that are going to be better guarantors of public trust.
If I may speak.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Kristen, what I'm hearing is a disconnect between what the police personnel perceive as informative about how they're doing, and what some other people, especially you speaking, perceive as whether or not they're doing well or not. So I'm wondering if you could suggest criteria for the police department that would align better with creating trust. You've asked them to do better, but what I'm hearing is they're doing as best they can at this particular point. And I think you might have a deeper understanding of the things that really need to be addressed that will make that trust possible. And so perhaps you could.
No, my request was not for them to do better, and it certainly is not going to be in the 3 minutes of this. It is how is it that they want to be measured? Because it can be a matter of, we can tell you how we're going to measure you, or you can tell us how you want to be measured. There's some middle ground in that space. But I think it's rather hard to determine right now how you want to be measured as it relates to from a racial equity perspective. I can't read the report and understand how you want the public to measure the efficacy of the department as it relates to racial equity.
We would be open to other specific criteria. Again, similar to the last discussion that we had about the moving violations. We are open to any other criteria that you think would be helpful.
And Kristen, it sounds like something that you and your working group, in talking about data collection and how data is being used, that you could really inform that whole process, probably the best of all of us. Is anybody else that's on the committee who wants to say something? Kimberly, your hand was up before, but it's not anymore. Do you want to say something?
I do. I had a couple of questions. The first question is about the crimes and arrests. And on page 11, so yeah, on page 11, there's two charts, right? So there's a chart and it shows all the arrests for 2021, white, Black, Latinx, Asian. Yeah. And then below that, there's another chart for just arrests per 1,000 Black resident population. And I guess I'm trying to understand the purpose of doing that. For me, it's almost like saying, hey, see, we're not bothering Black people. In the report last year, they it was a part, and there was like, what was the statement? And it was only 5 Black people. That was in the last year's report. I don't remember exactly what it was. And so I'm just wondering why the need to put that particular chart right there for just Black. You didn't do it for every race, it was just Black. And it kind of, for me, it feels like, like trying to prove that the police department, and I'm not saying that you are, let's be clear, trying to prove that the Brookline Police Department isn't like racist against Black people. So I'm just kind of wondering why that was put there. Anybody want to answer that?
I believe we did break it down by race, and ethnicity. I'm not sure the specific. I don't see it on page 11.
It's page 11 for me.
So I think, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, the paragraph below it, I think, is our attempt to explain why it's there. And I think it's because the census data changed a little bit to be more inclusive of people who identified as biracial or having identifying with more than 2 races. And this was an effort to sort of increase, it was something that we had the data, we didn't quite know how to analyze it in a way that was going to make sense and be consistent with the reports in the past. So we provided the data to allow any readers to use that to.
I understand that, Jen, absolutely. What I'm asking is, why didn't you provide the same data for every race that's in Brookline? Because in the box, in the chart above it, you broke down the 2020 arrests for every race that's in Brookline, right? But below there, you put a chart and a paragraph specifically about Black people. And I'm just wondering why you chose to do that.
I think because that's where the data in the census had a change. And we were trying to have the report reflect, the census data is something that we have no control over, how they ask the questions and the data that goes in. But that is, I can confer with Officer Goon, but I know that we did have discussions around how to have data that we could compare to years past when the questions themselves had changed.
Okay. My next question is, I think the acting chief wrote this letter. So on the page, I can't see, sorry, glasses. Page 5, first paragraph. The department has continued to utilize the power of social media to share, this is about social media. And so my question is, as far as Facebook goes or your social media accounts, who is monitoring, who is in charge of monitoring, why can't I say that word? Who's in charge of watching over that page?
Yeah. So that's our community relations department, Deputy Pastor.
Okay, and
crew.
Tim? Oh, deputy. Okay, so my next question is, if you're in charge of watching over that page, are you also in charge of making sure that harm isn't coming to the people who are interacting on that page?
So we have filters set to, there are certain keywords that will make it so that things don't get posted. We try to allow for it's a balancing act to allow for a healthy amount of discussion back and forth for people to express different opinions. People say unkind things about us as a department on there. And there have been a few times recently, and this is why we can't have nice things, right? But where things, have gotten a little bit heated. When we see a personal attack on a resident, we do our best. Like I said, I do have to sleep an hour or 2 at night, but we try to do this as a team and make sure if somebody is writing something on that we see as a personal attack, we try to take that down.
And if someone's making threats, do you follow up on that?
If there was a threat to commit a crime, we would absolutely investigate that.
Okay, thank you for that. My last question is, I know that the the SROs and the walk and talk program was, dismantled or whatever you want to call it. But I also saw in the report on page 20, I think it's 26. Yeah, 26. One of the things that the SROs did when they were in the school was that they sat at the round table with, with administrators. And I see that Officer Tim is still doing that. And why?
So that roundtable discussion is something where the kids aren't present, but it's important for sharing information back and forth around our kid. If Officer Tim is dealing with the kid at night, in the interest of, and there's a public safety interest, then the school administrators might need to know about that. If a kid's hurting, emotionally at home, it's in the best interest of the social workers to know about that. And sometimes if we're working with a juvenile who might be headed to court, it's important for us to have a bigger piece, to have the full picture, and to have a wraparound approach to get that kid help that they need. And we can't do that if the police department has one piece of the puzzle, the social workers have one piece of a puzzle. The town is not doing right by that kid, in my opinion. And that's something that the DA's office supports.
Okay.
Hey, Kim, to go back to your middle question on the social media account, I just wanted to relay a story. This year during a snowstorm, we had a young lady who was very upset that her car was towed, and she did go on social media, and she was attacked. She was also attacked by Turtle Boy, as a matter of fact. And I did reach out to her father in Florida, and we did put special attention on her home, and we did talk to her employer, who relocated her to another job. She was a visiting nurse, and she was able to find another job because she lost her job at the Beth Israel. And we did the best we could for her. And even our union came out and asked that she be left alone.
I'm glad you brought up Turtle Boy because he's pretty disruptive. And I wonder why would Turtle Boy even be allowed on the police, Brookline's police? I mean,
yes.
I get like the whole free speech thing and all of that, but Turtle Boy has threatened other people on your page. But I don't recall that they got that same follow-up as the person you're talking about. I also know about that person. Like, I thought they just lost their job. I'm glad to know that they were just were, sent to another, like they continue to be employed. That's good to know, because I felt really, I was like, okay, this is unacceptable.
We did reach out to her. We did reach out to her employer and asked that she does. We told her there was no issue with us. We understood that she was frustrated. It was a snowstorm. She had to get to work, and it was unfortunate. And they were kind enough to relocate her.
One more thing before I stop, since we brought up that, I don't think Turtle Boy should be allowed on your page, and it feels like Turtle Boy has some kind of like he's friends with Brookline Police, and that doesn't for Brookline Police, especially when he's threatening Brookline citizens.
But just to respond to that, I don't want to give it a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah.
A Turtle Boy, I guess, is a person. I think he's a person, and he's identified by name on his, but it's more of a news platform, and we can't possibly know all the people that follow him, and they can share our stories, and they do their own FOIA requests, and they get information all the ways that news outlets do. So we can't control their site.
No,
and then if somebody finds out about, but if somebody finds out about a Brookline incident from that site and then comes over, of course we allow them to engage in dialogue, and we cut it off at the point where it becomes a personal attack. So if a news outlet was making threats to commit a crime on our website, then I didn't see that ever. And I certainly want to know about it if it's something that I missed.
Okay, I'm going to cut this off because, first of all, I'm not one of the cool kids. I don't know who Turtle Boy is. And I see that Bonnie Bastian would like to make a comment, and we're running over time. So if you don't mind, we'll take this Turtle Boy conversation offline. So Bonnie Bastian, if you would like to make a comment, Sarah, if you could promote her, please.
Bonnie, you've been permitted to talk. Your 2 minutes will begin.
I hope this isn't about Turtle Boy.
Oh, it is actually, because I'm one of the ones. I'm one of the ones that have been harassed. So in your social media section, it says a lot about how many followers that you all have gained and all of that, but it doesn't talk about this content, this issue, this lack of safety that is your Facebook page. So on January 20th, I made a comment that went, that was a criticism of a post that the Brookline police had made about an arrest. And, you know, what came after was a very predictable pushback from fans of whatever had happened, people who disagreed with me, which is fine and pretty expected. But very quickly, my comment was taken up by Turtle Boy News, which resulted in multiple people posting this article on your Facebook page and people just spreading this everywhere. And at no point was this article ever removed. It's still there, in fact. I even posted it myself and tagged the Brookline police and said, is this what happens when someone posts a criticism on your Facebook page? And no one acknowledged it. There were particular comments that were removed through the whole 185 posts that were there. The comments were only shut off the day after the post was made. And so what resulted from this was phone calls to my personal phone that were threatening direct messages, threatening emails to me. I also know that other people that commented on it down the thread, like I won't mention any names because I'm sure they don't want to be, they were also threatened. And that's in line with Kayla Jones, who was the young woman who was fired from her job. She may have made a mistake, but Turtle Boy News picked it up and was a threat to her livelihood because they commented on something that you did. And you know that this is a toxic website because this website also took up Raul Fernandez's statements some years ago and ended up in death threats. So I just need to make sure that you understand that Turtle Boy News is a foul, racist website that is infesting your Facebook and social media pages. And there are also authors of Turtle Boy News posting on your page, none of which live in Brookline. So I just need you to know, as experts of internet safety, that your Facebook page is actually dangerous to the residents that live here when they post a criticism to the Brookline Police Department that they don't like. So I just need you to know that, and I hope that you can address that, because when I post a Turtle Boy article and flag the BPD in it, that is also a complaint to the Brookline Police Department, whether it comes on social media or not. And that was not addressed.
Okay, thanks, Bonnie. I think your time is up. And now I've been educated. I now understand what this is. Okay, I think we need to wrap up because our time is up. Is there anything that absolutely must be said by anybody who's waiting to speak before we say goodnight? So do we, Sarah, do we still have the slide with the survey code and all that you could put up while I'm...
1 second.
Okay, go ahead. So while Sarah's looking for that, I just want to say thank you to Chief Allen and Deputy Superintendents Pastor and Cullinane and all the other members of the department for their hard work and collaboration with the PCAC. It's a pleasure working with you. I want to especially thank Sarah Kaplan, our liaison to the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, whose help, advice, and technical support is invaluable. I want to thank Brookline Interactive Group for televising this hearing and for being a partner in making our local government accessible. We've got the slide up. If you, we would hope that you would fill out the survey if you could, so we can get some feedback on this event. And I also want to thank all of the attendees who came tonight and asked questions and made comments. We're very happy to have you and very happy to hear from you. So if there's nothing further, I'm going to say goodnight. And we hope that some of you who are here tonight will come to our meetings in the future. We normally meet on the last Monday of the month on Zoom at 7 o'clock. So look for our announcements on the town website. Thanks very much to everyone. And have
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Allen. And thanks to Sarah especially.